Hey, yo, it's me, Pops Van Marmalade, and you're watching the Comics-Related Madness Network. Uh-huh. So come get some. CromCon. CromCon.
Fairview's coffee has mysteriously gone missing. Mayhem ensues when strange, coffee-craving zombies plague the city. Detective Mickey Potatoes, an overworked public servant, uncovers why ordinary citizens are losing their minds and how to stop the coffee apocalypse. But it involves the mafia. And when you're dealing with mafia crime families, nothing is ever easy. The mafia controls everything in the city, including the police, including him. If he breaks the mafia, they will break him. So, the city is without coffee. The city is burning before his very eyes, but he's powerless. Detective Potatoes has the power to stop the coffee apocalypse, but if he does, he could lose everything.
What is Path of the Pale Rider anyway? Is it a comic book? No, that's not it. Is it this? What the heck is Path of the Pale Rider, man? There's no way this is right. How about this? I have no idea.
We can rob a bank.
Oh, it's this.
The Madness Comic Network and comic-related madness proudly presents Madness Tuesday Morning Brew. Tune in to our content on Comic Talk with Pops Van Zandt on YouTube.
Good morning. It's Tuesday. It's the Tuesday morning brew today. I'm so excited to be here. I have my coffee. I'm probably a little over caffeinated, having just chugged this entire thing right before the show. So good times. For those of you who are tuning in today, you are in for a great treat. We're going to have an awesome conversation with Lucifer Storm himself about his book, Ed Gein. Ed Gein, I can't say it. You'll have to correct me when you get on here, Lucifer. How do you pronounce it? I think it's Ed Gein, Demon Hunter. 4 issues of that, which were absolutely amazing. And then his new book, Lady Satan, which is really kind of a mind trip when you get into it. So we'll talk about that real quick. Path of the Pale Rider. We're counting down the pages at this point. Matt Chambers has been flying through since he's the second colorist attached. Our first colorist had a scheduling issue. I think he has like 6 pages left. That's it. So we're gonna get there sooner than I thought. So that makes me really happy having to start over on color like pretty much when we were done. But big week this week. The Funko Pops should be delivered to my house on Wednesday. So I'll have all the big James. There's 4 of them, Funko Pops, and they're giant. So they had to ship them in 2 boxes because they wouldn't all fit in one box. And then the new Funko Pop, which is Dwayne Fink. I will have it. I will take pictures. Everybody will be able to check that one out. I've seen the proofs for it. It's really good. So I'm excited for those. So lots of crafty things coming out, because I have extra time. And I did a test run on the riddle for number 3. It's working just fine. It's a few trusted people got to do it, and they're having a blast. So the riddle is set, and we're counting down to when the book is done. My editor is chomping at the bits, waiting for it, so that way we could get it out into the world. So anyway, Path of the Pale Rider news. Yes. So I'm really excited to talk to our guest today. I'm going to go ahead and bring him in. Lucifer Storm, everybody. Hello.
Hello. How the devil art thou?
I love that. I was waiting for you to say that.
It's the only reason people get me on their shows. I say that, and then they're like, right, you can go now. Bye.
What? No, that's such a great intro, but it's like, there's so many more things that we need to talk about, sir.
Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely.
Right? So for people who aren't familiar with you, why don't you tell us like your origin story, how you get into writing comics, just anything else that you write, stuff like that. So when did you start this whole journey?
I started, well, I've been writing ever since I was a kid. When I was a kid, I absolutely loved writing stories. And when I was at school, if they gave you math homework, you'd be like, whatever. Geography homework, nah. Creative writing homework, I'm in, baby. That's right. It. I'm all over that like a rash.
Right.
But I would say that I started seriously getting into writing. It was just around 2005, maybe a little bit earlier, maybe a little bit later, but not by much, because I'd always liked comics since I was a kid.
Yeah.
And when I got to like my teenage years, of course, you go through the whole thing with your parents going, you got to get rid of this stuff because that's what kids do. And I fell for it. I fell into that trap for
no.
that little moment in time. And then as I got to like about 18, 19, I was like, but I really like that stuff.
Yeah.
So fucking what?
Right. I'm just going to do it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And I was always dabbling about with weird story ideas and stuff. And then I came to the conclusion that I wanted to write stories for a living at a very young age. It was just before I left school. I had a careers counselor that came to me and said, "Hey, what are you going to do when you leave school? What are you going to do for a career?" And I was like, "I want to be a writer." And he said, "Well, you just can't do that because that's just a hobby. You need to think of an actual proper job." And I was like, "Okay, I'd like to be a musician." He was like, "No, that's a hobby once again." And we went through this list and he just kept going, "That's a hobby, not a job." And then he got to the point where he's like, "You're not taking this seriously, are you?" And I said to him, "All right, I want to be a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle." And he was like, "Get out, just get out."
Thank you.
He's like,
Really? He was telling you there are professions in writing and arts and music.
Exactly. And he just didn't want to hear anything of it. See, that's the thing. You guys in the US, I absolutely love the mindset. Your kids can come to you and go, "When I grow up, I want to be an astronaut." And you go, "As long as you work hard, you'll do it." Right. Over here, it's I want to be an astronaut. And our parents go, "Shut up, sit down, get in the line for the benefits office and find a real job." That's the difference between US and UK.
Lucifer, I would have looked right at dude's desk and said, everybody who wrote the article in that newspaper right there is a writer. And then I'd have walked out on his dumb ass.
Yeah, but I liked playing with him. I liked giving him other things and then leading up to that Ninja Turtle bit. That was great. Especially as like looking back at it, like I said to him, I wanted to be a writer. Well, that's what I do as a career. I said to him that I wanted to be a musician. Well, I have done that as a career and I do that on the side as well. I said to him that I wanted to be an actor in like movies, which he said that's a hobby. No one really does that as a career. And I ended up being in a couple of films and stuff. And then I said to him, I wanted to be a Ninja Turtle. And he said, "Right, get out." But I have actually done a project. Well, I worked on a project with several people. And one of the people working on it was Kevin Eastman, who co-created Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Yeah. So that's the closest I'll get to being a Ninja Turtle. But in my mind, I proved him wrong on everything.
The guy's still around. You should just be like, "Here's my resume."
Oh, he's probably long gone now, doing his own thing.
Old curmudgeonly people at the
yeah, exactly. But, yeah, in about 2004, 2005, I was hanging out with a couple of friends, one of whom wanted to be a writer, and the other one was, he was a pretty good artist, and he loved comic books since he was a kid. He wanted to be a professional comic book artist. Yeah. And we agreed, right, let's get together. Let's like make our own publisher, because what does the UK really have? We have 2000 AD and the Beano, and that's about it. And when you look at it now, it's a lot more than that. But at the time, that was pretty much it. So we started meeting regularly every week to discuss like projects and books and stuff. And like we sat down that first time and the artist showed pictures of this character that he had and stuff. And it's like, right, let's all walk away and let's come back with new things. Let's come back with artwork and scripts and stuff like that. And I would come back week after week like this with like a pile of scripts going, I know what we're doing. And I was like, what have you guys bought? And they're like, we've got weed. And then they would light up and that was it. So I was like, well, if you're not going to take it seriously, I'm going to go do this on my own.
Right.
So I went away and left them to do their own thing. And, I dabbled with some ideas and I hadn't drawn for ages at that point. So I had to reteach myself to draw because I thought, well, that's the only artist that I know in my small little town and stuff. I doubt there's too many out there. I better learn how to draw myself. So I started learning how to draw and stuff. And then it got to 2010, July 13th to be precise. And that's very important. That's when my father passed away. He had gone through like a 10-year battle with cancer. And my father wasn't a very religious man. He wasn't a very spiritual man. He wasn't a very superstitious man. He was quite a stoic man. But he was a para-trekker-decatryophobiac, which means he was terrified of Friday the 13th. right?
Oh.
And he died on a Friday the 13th.
The...
You
There's
couldn't
meaning
script
in
it.
that.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. And when he passed away, we had obviously like the solicitor came round to say, okay, gonna read out his will, and it was a lot of okay, these ones they've been left something, because I do have older siblings and they'd been left with stuff, and it got to me. It's been like, you've been left with nothing. Which I was like, hey, I kind of expected that. Like, it's no offense to my dad, but me and him, we didn't have the greatest understanding of each other. He was very much a laborer, and I just wasn't that way inclined. I was a creative person. I wasn't interested in that kind of stuff. I liked getting into the psyche of humans and animals and stuff like that. He didn't give a shit about that.
So he was like, I don't know where you came from. You might not even be mine.
Yeah, you know what? I wouldn't be surprised if he felt that way, because the amount of times I thought, I'm adopted, aren't I? You know, and I've often said to people, like, when I die at the ripe old age of 129, it will be because the mothership came back to get me, and I'll be like, I knew it, I fucking knew it. But the one thing he did do is, I mean, even though he left me nothing, I could have contested his will.
Yeah.
And he didn't want that to happen. So he left a little check. It wasn't much, but it was something. Okay. And I looked at it, and so many people were like, you need to, like, don't bank the check, contest his will, because then you'll be happy, you'll be sorted out for like a fair bit of your life and stuff. And I was like, no, I can't do that, because a will is a dying man's last wishes. Who the hell am I to say that their last wishes are wrong? That's pretty narcissistic.
Yeah.
So I looked at the check and went, well, what would my dad do with that money? And I thought he would probably turn it around and make a career out of it somehow, because that's pretty much what he did when he was like a teenager and he just left school. That's how he managed to make his career. So I was like, okay, well, what do I actually want to do as a career? Because up until that point, I've been doing dead end job after dead end job after dead end job. Long list of them. I've got a whole collection of uniforms.
That everything that you wanted to do is a hobby and not a job.
Yeah. And you know, I sat there and said, okay, I want to write. I want to get on with this writing. I believe I can do it. I know fuck all about it, but I believe I can do it, kind of thing. So I jumped in at the deep end and said, right, that's what I'm doing. I'm going to start my writing career, but I need to take it seriously and stuff. And I'd already been learning a bit about writing up until that point, but not everything. I wanted to explore a bit more, so I fast-tracked myself and did I got a bunch of books on the subject. I did a couple of courses, one of which landed me with a diploma in writing children's books, which, when you consider my name and the kind of books that I do, that's really ironic. But yeah, so I started it and I thought, it's sink or swim. Like, I'm jumping into the deep end without a life preserver, and I can't swim. So this either works or it doesn't. And if it doesn't, I'll get an ordinary job and probably take my own life somewhere down the line.
Terrible, but I feel you. It's just like, when you're a creative person, to be stifled is one of the worst things, or to lose belief that you can create. You know what I mean? Yeah. We already start out with so much of that imposter syndrome. Like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I just kind of wing it and people like it. So as long as they keep liking it, I'll keep doing it. Right. But then, like yourself, it's like, okay, maybe I should learn some things and apply myself, get some resources, get some education. Yeah. But really, we all feel like we're winging it all the time. So that's where we start. So if you crash and burn, it's really hard on creative types, where it's like, it's being trapped in a literal cage, not being able to create.
Doing a creative career is one of the most riskiest things that anyone can do. But without the risk, there is no reward. And the bigger the risk, the bigger the reward.
Right.
So I jumped out there, and even in the midst of really not knowing enough about how to write stories and stuff, barely scratching the surface, I got behind the desk and I was like, okay, I'm going to work on a book. And it was inspired by my dad's battle with cancer. And at the time, I wanted to do horror material, but a lot of the readers out there, they didn't want horror. They wanted superheroes. And I didn't, like, I've got nothing against superheroes. There's plenty of superhero books that I like. But
it's just ironic to me.
Yeah.
because where we are now in culture, it's very
it's spun around,
flipped, isn't it? It's like more horror, less superhero.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this is the thing. When I started the book, I was like, okay, if I'm going to do a superhero book, that's fine, but I'm doing it my way. So it has to have that horror undertone to it.
Yes.
So that's exactly what I did. I worked on a book called Jericho, which was about a superhero who has a very close friend who's dying of a brain tumor, and as they are dying of a brain tumor, there's a serial killer on the prowl who is taking out people with terminal illnesses. They see it as they are committing euthanasia, not murder, kind of thing. And she's the lead character. She's a very smart girl, but she's very depressed, and she's at university studying medicine, and she's trying to come up with an alternative to chemotherapy, and she's trying to do this using ultrasound. So she creates this ultrasound glove. But she doesn't do it very well, and it becomes an acoustic weapon that then falls into the wrong hands. And from there, she turns into this superhero or vigilante, whatever you want to call it, called Jericho, who goes out there and tries to not only take down the bad guys, obviously, but is trying to save her friend's life, because the idea behind it was every superhero has an arch nemesis, but the arch nemesis is normally a person. What if a superhero's arch nemesis was a terminal disease? Because that's not a person. It's not thinking. It's not trying to one up the superhero, but yet it's always 3 steps ahead. And to me, that was an interesting concept.
That is interesting.
So I ran with that, and I didn't expect it to get too far. And it kind of did. It started getting places. Like I took it to conventions and stuff, and the readership grew and grew and grew. And before I knew it, like I was on BBC Radio Solent talking with them about the book and stuff. I had directors coming to me saying, hey, we want to make a film, or we want to make a TV show of this, but they always wanted to like dumb it down and make a fluffy version, so they could get more butts in seats. And I've told Pops this before. There was one time that that I was speaking to a certain television station. I will not mention who they are, and they were trying to make me an offer saying, we want to turn this into a TV show and blah blah blah. And they explained how they wanted to tone it down so that it was a bit more family friendly, because it was a very mature reader's book. And it basically ended with me going, you can sit on this and swivel. And then I walked out.
I mean, what are they thinking? And this is a big thing with creators. It's like because a lot of people think that our end goal is to sell the script to someone big like a Netflix and make a big paycheck, and then everybody gets to see the film. But what they don't understand is that these are our babies. Exactly. Right? We are so attached to these stories and these characters. And we know what Hollywood does was that they take a script, they dumb it down, they Hollywoodify things, they make things they make women more promiscuous because they need to have that sex appeal. If we don't have it in the story, they add it. So there's just, they cut things, and then, you know what I mean? It's like the whole story ends up being something completely different. And we see it time and time again. And it's not what our goal is. It's not.
No, absolutely. Like you said, you are absolutely spot on when you say these are our babies. These are our children. Because the unfortunate thing is everything with Jericho was going very well. It got to a point where I said, well, hold on. If I've got these people coming to me and saying we want to make a film of it, what's to stop me from doing it? Why can't I do it myself? So we actually put in a lot of money, and we scheduled up a trilogy of animations. We were going to do these 2 tie-in animations that were focused on characters who appeared in the book, but they were not the lead of the book. So their story still needed to be told. And then that was going to lead into an animated movie of Jericho. And we were getting cast members in, and we started doing the voice recording for the very first animation. And we had actors from Hellraiser. We had actors from Back to the Future. We had a certain actor attached for a little while who was from Dragon Ball Z. Cool. But he came along and said, look, I've got a bit of a problem. I can voice this character, or I can voice Batman for a video game. And I was the one who's going, go voice Batman. Go voice Batman.
There's no decision there, bye.
Screw what I'm doing. Go, man.
Right.
So, but unfortunately, because things were growing, I couldn't do it all by myself. I was happy to take on the writing load because that's my wheelhouse. But I was also drawing a couple of books at the time. And I got in touch with an artist. Well, actually, the artist got in touch with me and said that he wanted to work on a book with me. So we started working on this 3-issue miniseries. And unfortunately, during the process of doing the voice recording, we literally just finished recording all the voices. We had a couple of animators lined up. We had a guy who was doing the score, and he used to work for Disney.
Wow.
And so I was very, very happy with things like that, going, yes, you know, we got all this stuff falling into place. And then the artist that I was working with, he had gone out there and run up massive debts in my name.
What?
So I had these collection people on my doorstep saying, okay, you need to either pay or we take a lot of your stuff to make up for the debt. Now, here's the thing that creative people don't think about, and I had never thought about it until this happened. When the collection people come along, okay, they don't care whether someone's built it up in your name or not. You can show them all the evidence you want. They are not the court. Okay, so the best thing you can do is actually pay off the debt and then go take legal action, which is what I had to do, except I had already spent a lot of money on getting these animations going. And I was like, there's a chance that they're going to take a lot of my stuff because I don't think I've got enough to pay off these debts. And if I do, then that leaves me very much broken. You know, I can't put food in my stomach. I can't put clothes on my back and stuff. So now the collection people made it very clear that because I had properties and characters like Jericho, who certain companies were interested in and filmmakers were interested in, that meant it's a very valuable item. And they start with your most valuable items. They start taking them first. But here's the problem. Your certificate, your certification that says this is my character, they look at it and go, well, that's just a piece of paper. So it's only valued at a few cents, isn't it? But we'll take it first because we know what it's really valued.
Come on, are you kidding
right?
me?
Because the copyright certificates and trademark certificates, these are like money. Okay. If your currency is backed by gold, then it has a lot of spending power. But the moment it's not part of a gold standard and isn't backed by gold, it's backed by nothing, which brings the spending power right down. And it means the government can print loads more money. And as they do, it just decreases in value. So technically, when you've got a $20 bill, it's not actually worth $20. It's probably worth about 30 cents.
Right.
Okay. And it's the same with UK money. And it's the same with your copyright certificates for your characters and your IP. So you have to find a way to back it with something. Otherwise, they will look at it and go, it's just a piece of paper with writing on it. So it's only valued at a few cents, and they take your most precious assets. So I had to go to my solicitor and say, look, I want to transfer the rights of my characters to a trusted friend. The only problem is that when you do that, you can't do anything with your own characters. They can't do anything with them, but you can't either. And there's a 10-year gap where those characters are in limbo.
See, here's the problem I have, Lucifer. You are writing horror stories, and then you are also living horror stories.
Yeah, I know, right? It's absolutely crazy. That, like, going through that experience absolutely broke my heart. And the way I explained it to someone was, if you're a parent and someone comes along and says, look, we're taking your kids away from you, that is heartbreaking, but at least you can hug them before they go. You can't do that with your characters.
They just took... is the 10 years almost up, or when does
the 10 years is over now.
Okay.
So it's all fine. They're all back in my possession, and I'm sure I will do something with them in the future. But it meant that a lot of people who got into Jericho, like, they never saw it get finished. They never saw the animation happen and stuff. A lot of money went straight down the drain. God. Okay, so that was a tough time. And shortly after that, I went through a bit of a tougher time. that I won't go into details about because I'd rather not. It's still a bit of a raw nerve for me. But during that time, like, things were looking really dark, you know, and I spent a lot of time existing in the world rather than living in it.
Yeah.
And I hated everything at that point. And I didn't want to go outside. I found it pretty close to impossible to go outside. So I didn't leave my house for well over a year or so. The only places that I would go that was outside of my house was my garden. And my garden started becoming overgrown with bramble and bracken and all these horrible fucking plants. And I was trying to tackle them as a way of just getting by. And the more I cut it all back, the quicker it grew. And I just got to the point where I went, well, fuck you then.
Yeah.
You know, you stay like that. I'm not coming out here again. And I was starting to feel a little bit better, but I still couldn't really go outside unless it was my garden. And I was in my kitchen one day just reading a book, and I heard this almighty bang at the kitchen door, the door that leads out into my garden. And I thought, what the fuck was that?
Yeah.
And I look out there, and there's these 3 little fox cubs, and they're just playing. They're having a bit of rough and tumble, and I just watched them for a good half hour to an hour. And at the end of it, they ran off into the bushes. And I thought, oh, that's lovely. That like really lifted my spirits. And I thought, I'll never see anything like that again. And then the next day, around the same time, I'm doing the same thing, and that bang happened again. And I looked out there, and it was the same 3 fox cubs. And they were running about and jumping and playing and stuff, and they ran off into the bushes again. But it was the same bushes. And that's when I went, hold on, something's not right here. So I went outside, and I explored a little bit. And I discovered that what had happened is this vixen had come along and thought, this overgrown garden is amazing. This is exactly where my cubs should be born. So she gave birth to these 3 cubs, but she died in the process. So I had to get rid of the body, which, take that out of context. That's going to make me sound really bad. so no one sound clip that, right?
I can't clip that, no?
Well, you can if you want, but only if you're using it as a ringtone.
There you go. So I got rid of the body.
Yep. So I got rid of the body, and I had great pleasure doing it. But it left me in a predicament where these 3 cubs, they had now made my garden their home, but they had no one to raise them. They were still quite young. And of course, when wild animals like that see someone like me, they're just going to go, screw that, and they're going to run away. So there's not a lot that I can do directly, but there was stuff that I could do indirectly. So I started getting into the habit of going out there at the same time every evening, and I was putting food out there for them, you know, bits of sausage, bits of burger, bacon, you know, whatever. And when I did, I'd make a clicking noise, just going, so that they could hear it and get used to it and go, oh, okay, 30 seconds, 5 minutes after we hear that noise, the sky will have rained meat. So I did that for a little while. That's a good
clip right there too. I'm just saying.
Yes. Now that one people can clip. That's absolutely fine. So I did that for a little while, and then one day I got out there, and I had like a plate with all these different bits of meat on it, and I was just grabbing hands full and just chucking it across the lawn. And as I was doing it, I noticed in the bushes there were these eyes just looking through the bushes at me, and I was like, okay. Play it cool. Right. And as I threw the meat, it would watch the meat go up and down, up and down, up and down. And after about 3 or 4 times of doing this little creature went, he's the one who makes it rain food. I need to go speak to him.
Yeah.
So this little fox came out. He walked right up to my feet and just sat there and looked at me as if to say, well, go on, feed me. And I was so taken aback by this. And I was like, okay. And I just dropped food in front of him, and he ate it. And he was still a bit cautious of me, but he was quite friendly and tame. The other ones, they wouldn't come anywhere near me. But this brave little fox did. And he started doing it every night. Now, when I meet someone for the first time, if I don't know their name, I'm like, hey, buddy, how's it going? I always refer to them as buddy. So I did the same to him, because I was like, well, he's not going to tell me his name, you know? So every time I saw him, I just said, hey, buddy, how you doing? And he got used to that being his name. And that fox became my best friend for 5 years straight.
Wow.
And we had a great relationship. I could go outside into my garden and just go, hey, buddy. And he would come out of nowhere and be like, yeah, that's my name. Don't wear it out.
Like, and when I hear that name, I know there's food attached.
Exactly. And he used to sit down with me outside, and like the amount of times I'd wake up, make breakfast, and I would sit outside in the garden, and then he would come along and be like, well, where's my breakfast then?
Right.
Come on. And it was just absolutely wonderful relationship. There was one time that a random fox who didn't live in my garden came along and had a bit of a fight with him. And when I stepped out there to be like, hey, what's going on? He came right behind my legs and just sort of like hid there, like, you protect me, kind of thing. And it was a lovely friendship. But unfortunately, he passed away. Like I said, they only live about 5 years anyway. But it was because of him that I eventually got back on my feet and went, you know what? If this little fox can come out of the bushes and befriend me, that's a hell of a lot of bravery. What's stopping me from getting outside of my house? Wow. So from there, I started getting out of my house. I started going to like the local pub, making new friends. And when I made new friends, they'd be like, so what do you do as a career? And I'd be like, well, I'm a comic book writer. And they're like, so what are you working on at the moment? And I was like, I need to figure that one out.
You're like, there's a thing. I just don't have it yet.
Yeah, and I showed them old stuff of Jericho, and they were like, this is amazing. Like even something when I know that character from somewhere.
Yep.
I was like, you might do. I don't think many people would, but you might do, kind of thing. And that got me going, you know what? I need to get back on this, because I'd spent so long looking at it as I built up this career and now it's been burnt down. And at that moment, I got into the mindset of it's good that it got burnt down, because now I get to start again. And I don't have to make the same mistakes.
Right, and learn and pivot. It's all about pivot and move forward, because it's like your story is a little extreme compared to what most of us go through, but a lot of us will go through some kind of financial hardship or trusting the wrong people, etc., etc. You know, and it's common, unfortunately, you know, when you get creatives together. Some creatives are more passionate or driven than others. Others, or they're just downright evil, where they steal, they run up your debt and your name. Like, what the hell is that?
There are always people out there who think, I deserve a piece of that pie.
Right.
And they want the biggest piece. To them, a piece of the pie is all of the pie except for the crumbs, and that you deserve the crumbs, kind of thing. And those people will bend over backwards to get what they think is a piece of the pie. But all that really happens is they're left with nothing and you're left with a lot less.
Yep.
You know, and I think the reason why some of us do end up in these situations is because when we enter a creative career, we have a very romanticized idea of how it should go. It's very Disney-like. And Disney has fucking lied to us at every single step.
Right. None of this is legitimate, people. And it doesn't go the way that you want it to. Always have a plan B. I don't think you could have anticipated what happened there. I don't think there was a way to.
I don't think anyone could have. And there's no one out there that's sort of like going, okay, just in case there's some money troubles and you have a lot of debt, this is what you should do to protect your characters and stuff. I wish there was, but there aren't people doing that. At least I'm saying now things like, you know, make sure that you back your copyright certificates with some sort of cash or cash equivalent, because then they have to value it for that equivalent should you be in that situation.
Right.
You know, and it also means you got a lot more leverage when you're talking to publishers. Because I've worked with publishers before, and trust me, the last thing a publisher wants to do is give you money.
Right?
Okay, but the more leverage you have, the more likely they're going to go, all right, here's the checkbook, you write it.
Right.
And I guess that kind of leads to like where I am now. Obviously, I've skipped a little bit, but I think most people know that, you know.
I did have a question though about when you were writing as a child. Were you writing horror or scary stories at that point, or at what point where you're like, horror is my jam?
Oh, Oh, me and horror, we have a very long love affair, should I say? But it's quite strange because, like I said earlier about having a diploma in writing children's books, it sounds so ironic, and people look at me, and when I say that, they're like, "Yeah, fucking pull the other one."
Right.
I was actually a really sensitive kid. I was easily scared by things, but a part of that was because I was raised by a parent with narcissistic personality disorder. So they teach you to be scared of everything.
Everything.
Because then they have the control on you. And they wanted to control everything that I watched. So if it was anything that was a little bit more mature than an episode of Sesame Street, it was not happening. So I was often made fun of at school because kids would be like, "Did you see this show? Did you see this movie?" And I'd be like, "No, my parents won't let me," kind of thing. And they were like, "What?" And one of my parents actually would have let me, but it was,
the other one.
Yes.
I don't think mine was that extreme, but I had moments of that too, where it's like, you can't watch The Simpsons. And it was like, it's a cartoon. But I mean, now as an adult, when I watch The Simpsons, I was like, oh, there's other stuff in there. Like, if you're an adult, that you'll catch it.
Yeah, if you're an adult, you'll catch it, but the kids won't.
Right, but still, we weren't allowed to watch that either. So
This is one of those instances where Pops has to pop in. Since we're going to talk about cartoons with adult themes, kids cartoons with adult themes, I got to bring SpongeBob into the conversation because Mr. Krabs lives in Bikini Bottoms.
He doesn't.
People don't get it, but it's always there. It's always there. You know what I mean? It's everything you're watching, and you're like, did they just say? Yeah, they did. And the kids have no clue, right?
Yeah, but absolutely.
That's always like, I think back when we were growing up, adults had a lot more qualms about the cartoons that we were watching or things that we were watching and consuming. It was like, no, you can't watch that. So a lot of times it was like you'd go to a sleepover, and that's the first time you would see, like for me, that was the first time I got to see slasher movies. I went over to a sleepover with 8 other girls, and they were watching Friday the 13th, and I was like, what is this?
Okay, now I gotta give you the parents' view too, because when my son was young, South Park came out.
Yeah.
Which
I watched South Park.
Oh, South Park.
But I wouldn't let him watch South Park.
Right. Yeah. I mean,
you see what I'm saying? It's like
there's things that are for kids that have double meaning, but there's some things that are just not for kids that are dressed up.
There was only one episode that I let him watch, and that was the public pool.
Oh yes. I
mean, when we started watching that, it's just
he was always after.
What was the first episode with the aliens and Carmen had the satellite dish up his butt?
That was the first. One. That's still my favorite episode.
And the dog is gay. I mean, there's so many things. Right from the beginning, you're like, this is not for kids.
Oh yeah. But see, he used to be after me to take him to the public pool, and I didn't want to tell him the real reason why I didn't want to go to the public pool, right?
So you let Koepp do it.
South Park.
You let South Park teach
perfectly. South Park explained it.
You're like, just watch this.
I was like, okay, I'm gonna let you watch this one episode.
Urine is in their water.
But peeing in the pool, man. It was like, no, dude, I ain't going to the public pool. We lived in Phoenix. I had 15 friends with beautiful pools in their backyard, right?
Right.
Why would I go to the public pool?
Right. That's where all his friends are. That's why he wants to go. But they don't get it.
Yeah. Anyway, have fun. I'm out.
So, as I was saying, I mean, Pops does have a good point there. There is some material that, it's quite right for a parent to say, no, my kids cannot watch that.
Right.
The unfortunate position I was in is there was plenty of material that was suitable for children that I was not allowed to watch or consume.
There's nothing.
Exactly. And the way they did it was always through fear. Oh, if you watch that, you'll have nightmares because there's bad, scary, horrible stuff in there. Or it'd even be things like the only type of people who watch that are criminals. You're not going to be a criminal when you grow up, are you?
Oh my gosh.
Real harsh stuff like that. And then one day we were in a supermarket. Now over here, we call it Asda. I believe you guys call it Walmart. Okay. Now, this is back in 1988. And I'm running around and like my parents are like, will you stop that? It's a busy Saturday night. And I'm just like, freedom. Someone take me away from these lunatics. You know? And I come to the TV section and it's just they're all airing BBC One. And my parents don't know I'm there. And I'm watching a bit of this show that I never knew existed called Doctor Who. And in that moment, I'm watching a Dalek chase the Doctor up the stairs of a basement, and I am hooked. I'm like, oh, and then the credits roll, like to be continued. And I'm like, I need more of this.
Yeah.
But my parents came along and they caught me watching it, and they were like, you're not meant to watch that. And I was like, but it's awesome. I need this in my life 5 minutes ago, kind of thing. So because I had seen a bit and I was okay with it, because we walked away from that, my parents were like, you're going to have nightmares, you're going to have nightmares, you're going to have nightmares. And I didn't have any nightmares. Yay. Yes. So I managed to turn it around and go, okay, I'll watch what you say is suitable for me. But every Saturday at this time, I get to watch Doctor Who.
Okay.
Unfortunately, this was the penultimate season, so I only got like 2 seasons worth of it, and then it was taken off the air for so many years, and I absolutely fell in love with it. And my parents had just became members at a video rental store, but not like a big chain one like Blockbuster. It was a small mom and pop's one called Flix, and we would go there almost every Saturday or every other Saturday. And it would be a case of you can choose a video from this small section, because this was where all the Doctor Who videotapes were. So week after week, I kept renting out different Doctor Who videotapes. At one point, we bought one back and they were like, this thing is dead because your son has rented it so much. We have to get a new one. But whenever I did that, that section was always next to the horror section.
Nice.
And that's where you had all the Freddy Krueger posters and you had all these VHS covers. Like I always remember seeing the cover to Exorcist 3 every single time. That and the cover to Child's Play. And this was a couple of years before the Jamie Bolger case, where they ended up taking Child's Play 1, 2, and 3 off the shelves. And I'm looking at this stuff, and every now and then you'd hear this voice of said parent going, "What are you doing? Don't look at that. Don't even think about it," kind of thing.
I wasn't looking.
Yeah,
I was.
And then one day we went in there, and I'm looking at the Doctor Who videos, and I'm like, I do like this, but I've just seen a video cover that really appeals to me. What's this movie? It's called The Monster Squad. And over here at that time, you had to be at least 15 years old to see that movie.
Okay.
And I was about 7, 8 years old. Might have been a bit younger than that. No, I was probably about 6 or 7. And I thought, right, I know they're going to say no, but I have to be sure. Because I picked that off the shelf and I looked at the cover, was like, oh, this looks amazing. Turned it over, was like, this sounds amazing. The screenshots look amazing. So I went over to Parent and was like, I want to rent this one. And they were so close to exploding. They were like, no way, this, that, and the other. And I didn't know what to do. And all of a sudden, as if by magic, a little lie fell out of my mouth. And I said to them, but I've seen it before. It was on TV the other day. And that was absolute bullshit. I think my mind just went, you're going to get punished for this. If you're going to get punished, you might as well make it worth it. So I told that little lie and they went, okay, I don't believe you, but you say that you did. So we're going to let you rent it. However, if you have nightmares, you are never allowed to watch anything ever again. And I was willing to gamble. Yeah,
I was going to say, as a kid, though, it's like you can't really control that.
Exactly. But it was like, look, I'm watching this movie somehow, somewhere.
Right.
Right.
You're like, I'm going to do it.
Yeah. So we made that agreement. I went home. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. And I watched what I still consider to be my first horror movie, The Monster Squad. And I absolutely adored it. And I think I adored it for 2 reasons. One, because of the horror element and the different style of storytelling and the production values and stuff. But also because it did showcase very briefly families getting along, not acting like mine. And that was kind of like my first inkling of something's not right here. And I needed that. I really did need that. And that was the moment that I absolutely fell in love with the horror genre. Like, I still loved things like Doctor Who and, you know, reading the comic books like Spider-Man and Batman and Fantastic Four. But there was just something about horror that really spoke to me. And seeing that just made me want to explore more of it. So I actually spent a lot of my childhood going to school, and like, I didn't have many friends at school. I had a couple of friends, but these were friends whose parents let them watch stuff like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th. So I'd be like, hey, if I lend you this video, and they'd be like, we don't care about Doctor Who. And I'd be like, yeah, but it is good. And if I lend it to you, you can lend me Friday the 13th.
Right? But see, that's where it was for me too, because we weren't allowed to watch horror. And in fact, like, my sister and I are close in age. We're 18 months apart. She's the older one. So it was her friend that we would go spend the night over her house. And she was the one that loved horror and would scare the crap out of my sister, right? And it's like, my mom and dad had no clue we were watching Stephen King at, 10 years old. And my sister wouldn't sleep for months. And I would be like, I wonder if, you know what I mean? And then I'm breaking the story apart, like, in this and that. And so I would always want to go to this girl's house, even though they wouldn't play with me because I'm younger, right? I would get left out, but I knew there was a movie involved and I wanted to watch it. So I was like, I would like to go.
Yep.
So I'd always, make some kind of bargain so I could go, just so I could see the movie, because I knew there would be a good one at this girl's house. So.
Well, that was the thing. Like, unfortunately, the era that I was growing up in, the 80s, this was also the time of the video nasty scandal. So there were actually a lot of horror movies over here that were banned outright. Like, we didn't get The Exorcist or Texas Chainsaw Massacre till about 1999, 2000.
What? I didn't know that.
We never had them, but there were always people dealing in bootleg VHS.
Yeah.
So when we did get to watch those movies, we were breaking the law.
Oh my gosh.
We could have gone to prison. And there's me as a young kid turning into a teenager. And I'm learning about things like Hellraiser and Nightmare on Elm Street, which we had those, but at the time they were actually quite heavily censored. But that's also the time that I started getting to know people who did bootleg VHS. And all of a sudden, I'm getting things like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I'm getting The Exorcist. I'm discovering about subgenres like giallo movies and stuff like that. And that made me go, oh my God, there's more to horror than what I've already... I loved what I had already been seeing, the tongue-in-cheek popcorn kind of horror. And now I'm getting into like the deeper stuff, some of the older stuff. And like I said, I've just always loved horror. And I think a lot of it's that forbidden fruit. But it's the forbidden fruit that when you get it, for a lot of people, it's like, when you get it, it's actually okay. But my mind, even today, is still in that mindset of being a kid in the 80s, where it's like, oh man, if I've got this in my backpack and I get pulled over by a cop, I can be arrested, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And there's something very appealing about that. And when I did see movies like The Exorcist and stuff that had been banned over here, a lot of the time I walked away from it going, why? Why are you afraid to show us this stuff?
Yeah.
Because it's always the stories behind it. They're worse than the actual movie itself.
Right. And you know what? It almost helps people see it is when you censor it. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is forbidden. Don't see it. So people are like, oh, I need to know. I need to know why. What is so bad about it? Then they see it, they're like, so.
I mean, we're a less censorial country now, but you do still get the odd movie that is banned or heavily cut. It's rare, but it does happen. I think the last time it happened was around 2011. We had a movie over here called Murder Set Pieces that was banned. There was another one called The Bunny Game that was banned. A Serbian film was heavily cut. And then even though...
Well, that one is like...
Well, yeah. That great story. Amazing story. But fucking hell, that disturbs the hell out of you. But that had been cut by about 25 minutes here. And even though it had been heavily cut, and then given a certificate to be put out on the shelves. The police were still raiding video stores and confiscating copies and then arresting the owners, claiming, no, this is flat out illegal. You know, it's absolutely mental. So I think that's another reason why I still have that in the back of my head of like, this is the forbidden fruit. Horror is the forbidden fruit. And it tastes lovely.
I think more like it's just how deep do you want to go? You know what I mean? Because we have all these different kinds of horror genre. You have the supernatural, you have the slasher, we have true crime, you know, up the wazoo. So that was another question I had for you, because with so many different ways to approach horror, the way that you approached it, because not only is it serial killer slasher kind of take, but with a real person though. Yes. Ed Gein is a real person in history. And I was telling Lucifer before the show, like when I read the comic, I was like, splotchy memory, right? I was like, I know I've read about him before, but I needed to go refresh my memory. So I had to research. I went and researched, and I was like, I had forgotten about some of his weird quirks. I knew some of the more grisly things, but I forgot some of these things that are in the comic. I was like, oh yeah. So it's interesting to me that the way that you approached it is supernatural and slasher, but through the eyes of a real person, and exploring horror that way. So what made you go that route?
Whenever I work on a story, I think it's very important as a writer to continually be challenging yourself. Okay. Now, there are a lot of people online who take challenges like NaNoWriMo and like little short story challenges, and that's fine if that's what people want to do. That kind of stuff never works for me. Like, I have to really, like, I can't work on a story that I want to tell. I have to work on a story that I need to tell. I have something to say. And at the time of coming up with Ed Gein, like I said, I'd just been going to this pub close by to me, and I'd been making new friends and telling them about the work that I did. And at the time, I was actually developing and working on Lady Satan, which we'll talk about a bit later, because that was a very cathartic experience. But like I said, I'll explain more about that later. And I was hanging out with these guys, and for the first time in my life, I didn't just have friends. I had friends who had some similar tastes. So they liked a lot of the music that I liked. They didn't really like horror as much as I liked, except for one of them. And they all had a fascination with serial killers. And when I was a teenager, I had a fascination with serial killers and learned a lot about serial killers. But I kind of left that to the side for a moment, because the more I came out to like the friends I had at that moment in my life, sort of like, yeah, I've been learning about serial killers. They were like, you're going to become one, kind of thing. So
I don't tell people some of the things I researched for that reason. Because at least you're a man. When I'm a lady and I'm like, I write horror, and they're like, we thought you wrote cookbooks, and I was like, no.
But now you can start a new genre, horror cookbooks.
There's a lot of horror. I have a zombie cookbook, believe it or not.
Excellent. But anyway, so I was speaking with these guys, and they weren't comic book readers. But they would watch like the Marvel movies and the DC movies and stuff, or the TV shows. And one of them, like, he had such a dark sense of humor. And I was like, we're going to get on just fine. Me and you, we're going to get on great. And we would often make these really dark jokes. And some people turn around and be like, damn, why the hell am I hanging around with you? Kind of thing. And we were talking. And I thought to myself, he doesn't read comic books. But if there was a serial killer one, he might read that. And I don't mean a serial killer book like From Hell or the unauthorized biography of Jeffrey Dahmer, even though those are great books. You needed something that was a little bit more fantastic. Okay? And I thought, could I do that? Could I take a real life serial killer? Because if I gave them a fictional one, they'd be like, why bother with this? We've got Dexter and other shows like that. Right. So I thought it would have to be a real life serial killer. And I thought, can I make them the lead of a story? Not a hero, not an anti-hero, just the lead that we follow. And, I got home and I thought about it for a few days and, did other things that I needed to do. And I got home one night, and ironically, I was watching South Park.
Right.
And I'm sat there, and I'm trying to think, like, well, which serial killer would I do?
Right.
And what would it be called? What would the book be called? What would it be about? And I couldn't think of anything. So I was just like, turn off brain, watch South Park. And I was just led on my couch, because it's always the way. You turn on something that you want to watch, you start set up, and then very quickly you start going over, and then that's it. Best position to be in whilst watching TV, even though everything's sideways. And I'm starting to fall asleep. And I'm like, cool. When I wake up, it'll be tomorrow. Fresh new day. Exciting things to do. And as I'm starting to fall asleep, this is when I learned that my brain is both my worst enemy and my best friend.
Mine is the same. It's exactly, it's like half awake, right?
Yes.
Half awake is when the ideas come.
Yeah. So as I'm falling asleep, my brain just went, hey, what about Ed Gein, Demon Hunter? And I just woke up and went, that's a fucking great idea, brain. Where were you when I needed you the most? This idea doesn't matter, and you chime in with a great idea. But if the police were to turn up now, you wouldn't know what to say, would you? Would you? Right? And it just made me laugh. There was something about it that made me laugh. And I thought, that is the stupidest idea in the world, which is why I have to explore it.
It's genius.
Right?
Yes.
So I started looking into it and thinking, well, okay, you've got a title and you know which serial killer it is. And when I first started learning about serial killers, Ed Gein was the one that fascinated me the most. So I think it was only natural that my subconscious went, it has to be about Ed Gein, right?
Yeah.
And there he is, the man himself.
Yeah, I was like, I know we're going to talk about it, so I just want to let people see the visuals that are behind it.
Oh, yeah.
Just because it's such a beautifully drawn book, but it's amazing. This continue.
Thank you.
Continue.
So, yeah, I just started playing around with it. And there's one thing I love about writing, and that's the draft before the first draft.
Yes.
Which sounds weird to a lot of people. I call it the vomit draft, because it's where you just...
I call it the sandbox.
I can understand why. I can understand why. I call it the vomit draft because it's like my brain goes, you know everything you know about writing? Forgotten.
Yes.
And you are just literally spewing out this idea that has no shape. It has no form. It has no reason or right to exist, but you're doing it anyway. And you're scribbling away like a madman who's possessed. And I love that moment because you're not paying attention to what you're writing. Your subconscious is doing all the work. Right. So what I like to do is I like to just spit it all out on the page, and I do it either till I get to a point where I go the end, or to a point where I go, I don't know where to go from here.
Right.
So I've written myself into a corner, and then I take that paper and I put it in a drawer and I forget about it for a few weeks. And then I come back to it and I read it back over. And normally through that process, I feel a lot of shame because I'm like, oh, I really wrote that. And that's when the big red pen comes out and you start crossing bits out. And then the green pen comes out and you start going, well, that's staying. But it's also when your subconscious goes, no, like the story can be about anything, but this is what it's really about.
Right.
So whenever I promote the book, I often say to people, yes, it's about the real life Ed Gein,
right,
in a fictional setting.
In a fictional setting.
On the surface, it's a fun adventure horror story with a bit of humor, a bit of heroics, and a little bit of heart in a frying pan. But underneath it all, it's a story about a middle-aged man who's coming to terms with the fact that the mother he loved all of his life never loved him.
Right.
That's what the core and the heart of the story really is.
For people who are unfamiliar with Ed Gein, he was born early 1900s. There's a lot of pop culture that is now based on bits of his life because of how off the deep end he was. And again, had this mother figure in his life that was over, how do I want to say this, domineering. She controlled every aspect pretty much of his life. His father wasn't around, or an alcoholic, and his mother was the over religious, instilling fear and just saying like all women are promiscuous and sirens of the devil. So when you start warping a mind like that, it's all right. Do they have that gene where it takes them to that dark side? But is it nature or nurture? This is something that comes up with serial killers all the time that we can discuss ad nauseum. But it's like his mother was really the driving force in his life that made him do the things that he did. Just the upbringing that he had. So Ed was exhuming corpses, and he was taking skin, and he was making a skin suit. So if you see, you'll see things in pop culture like Psycho with the mother, the relationship with the mother. I'm talking, of course, of Alfred Hitchcock, Psycho. And then, of course, Silence of the Lambs, Buffalo Bill, making a skin suit. These are all, attributes to Ed Gein. So he was caught. He was committed. He did not stand trial. He was insane, and eventually did die. So this story picks up like he's in hell in this loop where he's continually digging up his mother's grave. That's where they find him. And it's just really interesting that Satan has to have his help to go hunt down a demon who has escaped hell, and is if the demon can figure out a way to get back into their body, can therefore break into heaven and start a war. Correct?
Yep, this is correct. They can prove that God is not infallible, and because of that, the destruction of everything in the universe will begin.
Right. So that's the whole reason why someone needs to stop this demon, but Satan can't do it himself. He has to preside over hell. So send a hunter, a human hunter, to go hunt a demon, right? Send the evil to track the evil. So genius. And it like I said, I was reading this and I was like, you see the Buffalo Bill bar, and like the bartender's name is Mary, which all has to do, like, we're talking about pop culture again. And like the two murders that Ed Gein was, I don't know if he confessed to, was Mary, right? The bartender at the bar.
Mary Hogan and
Mary
Bernice
Hogan.
Warden.
Right. So those are the two that he owned. Did he own them, or did they just?
No, they found Bernice Warden's body in his house, hung upside down, headless. Yeah, they found Mary's head in the burlap sack in his kitchen.
Right, there you go. So, but he was making furniture and lamps and all sorts of crazy shit out of human remains. They found all sorts of body parts in Ed's house. So again, how much of this is Ed, and how much of it is his mother's voice in his head telling him that all women are evil, right? Yeah. So it's just an interesting figure in time that was a real person, and to put him in the setting where now he has to hunt a demon. And even in the story, I found it great that Ed was like, at first he says no, because he was like, I'm going to fail and then mama will be upset at me. She'll be disappointed. So it's still his relationship with his mom. And I think they convince him, because of his relationship with his mom, where he was like, mama will be proud that I saved God. You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's like, it's really even in hell, his relationship with his mother is still the driving force behind his actions. And people, I gotta say, when you get to the end and you find out, and I'm gonna spoil issue 1 for you right now, but I'm not gonna talk about the rest of them because you gotta go on that roller coaster ride yourself. But here's the kicker. So Ed is now on Earth. This dog that you see, Ezra, is a demon that has been made into a bloodhound to accompany him, who didn't want to come, by the way, which was awesome. And at the very end, they find the demon in the Buffalo Bill bar in a scene of carnage, and the demon is his mother. So this...
If only we had the soundtrack, the bum, bum, bum.
Right? And it's like, when you find it out, it's like, oh God, where are we going now? So just a great plot. And then it just takes off from there, people. So just really gets you hooked in. So, and like you said, you did mention all these other serial killers like Dahmer and Ramirez, and it's like they list them off, and it's like the fact that you chose Ed Gein was interesting to me, and I think you said why. but there's so many other serial killers and other ways that you can go in the story too.
Yeah, absolutely. But I mean, I'm very focused on writing character-driven stories. I think that's something that comes through without me even needing to say it.
Yeah.
And one of the keys to a character-driven story is if you take that character out of their story and put someone else in, if the story stays the same, then it's plot-driven.
Right.
But if the story would be completely different, it's character-driven. And if I had dropped Ted Bundy in there, or Richard Speck, or Jim Jones, the story would be so drastically different. It just had to be Ed Gein.
It makes much more sense for it to be him and chasing his mother. And it's like, so, and I mean, when I was researching, I know that she was kind of a warped person, but can you speak
That's one word.
About how, I mean, I say that lightly, right? She worked. But how much research did you do into Augusta and her relationship with Ed? And like how much of that is going to show up in the story?
We did an extensive amount of research. I mean, when I was, whilst I was scripting it, it was days and nights for several weeks, watching documentaries, reading books, scouring the internet, speaking to whoever you could to find any tiny bit of information. I even went on to eBay to see if there were any books available that were long out of print that included any information that I could find, because where I'd spent so long, like that big gap of time where I hadn't really been learning more about serial killers from teenager to like recent years, I had to refresh myself on a lot of it. So I was going through it and going, oh yeah, I remember that. And then I was learning new things and going, oh, this is fantastic. And I found that there was a comic book series. It was quite an underground comic book series, and I can't remember the name of it. But I picked up some issues of it, and each issue was a biographical depiction of different serial killers.
Interesting.
So there was a John Wayne Gacy one, there was a Ted Bundy one that I picked up, and there was an Ed Gein one which had two different covers, so I managed to pick up both covers. And there was loads of information in there that I was not aware of, such as Ed Gein's earliest memories. Which I thought, okay, this is fascinating stuff. I need to learn about this. Such as one of his earliest memories is being a young child and him being close to the stairs that lead to the basement. And he didn't know who, but it could only have been his mother. He felt something push him. So he was about to fall down the stairs as a very young child. He's only just learned how to walk. And then his mother grabbed his arm and held him up and just started screaming abuse at him. You stupid little shit, all this, that, and the other. If you had fallen and broken your neck, I wouldn't have done anything. So I found that absolutely fascinating. And I didn't know that where Plainfield is a very small town, similar to the town that I live in, probably smaller and a smaller population than the town that I live in, though. A lot of the locals there, once the news had got out there about Ed, they didn't know how to handle it. But they didn't want to be scared. They didn't want to be crying and going, oh my God, how could something like this happen? So everyone who lived there started incorporating a sense of gallows humor. And they were always trading jokes about Ed. And little limericks that they had made up to deal with the situation. And this was stuff that I all discovered from this book. And I was like, this is timeless. This is classic. This is the stuff that I think a lot of people would overlook, or they would probably give up a bit before they got to this part in the research stage. So I went through all that, and then I went scouring because apparently some new photographs, well, not new, they were old photographs, but they'd been discovered several decades later that had never been seen before, from when the police were searching the farmhouse and some of the stuff they found. So I was like, great, I've got to see some of these photos. So I found all the old photos and I found some of the new photos as well. There was one in particular where they were bringing out one of the chairs that he upholstered with human skin. And I was like, right, I'm going to save that to my hard drive reluctantly and hope no one comes along and says, we need to check that. Because I'll be like, yeah, let me explain something real quick.
All right, before you look at that, can we talk, please?
They'll be like, all right, Mr. Storm, first things first, no porn, disappointed.
You're like, there isn't any porn on there, however.
And then when I got Christian aboard to do the artwork, because it was a long, arduous process finding an artist who would say yes to doing a book like this one. Christian was absolute heaven sent. And I said to him, okay, it's about Ed Gein. And originally I said to him, oh, it's going to be a one-shot, because I was still early in the stages of scripting and honestly thought it was going to be a one-shot story and evolved into this 4-issue miniseries.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to him, it was about Ed Gein and it was set in the 90s. And he was like, I'm in. I am all in. And I said, okay, but I'm going to have to send you lots of reference. And he was like, that's great. I was like, I don't think you understand.
Right. So you're like, I need all these
crime scene photos
in this room. And good luck.
Yeah. Yeah. So I sent him like this huge folder full of crime scene photos and photos from when he was when they were attempting to try him, and you know, and all this other stuff, so that he could get the look as accurate as possible. I even sent him pictures of Augusta Gein's gravestone and things like that. And one of the things that really solidified that me and Christian were going to get on like a fucking school on fire was the fact that when he was drawing the pages, not only did he have all these photos printed out around him, he was listening to podcasts about Ed Gein as he's drawing it. So the research was extensive. Absolutely extensive, and
it comes through. It really does. When I was looking at the scene, the police are in his house, that scene, and you're looking around. You're like, oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. You know what I mean? Like, you just look around this one panel and all the horrific things that are crammed into the one panel, and then when you compare it to the list of things that they found in his house, they're all there. Sorry, people, but you gotta see it. And the fact that it's accurate is you know, and it's like there's so much horror comics that are out, like Liar. Okay, so I was reading Liar, super gory, and when you put it in context of that's fictional and this is factual, it makes it that much scary. I don't know about scarier, but grotesque. When you realize that this actually happened, it's gross. It's so gross it makes me laugh, which you know is pretty gross, because if I'm giggling, it's gross. It's gross, but it's a good time, and it's just so fun to see something that accurate as well. So I think that you guys tackled the dark side of it so accurately. That in itself makes it a must read. Like, you guys have to see what's in this book, right?
I think so. I think people should.
I think they should. If you like horror, I love horror. You know what I mean? And again, when I went in, I was like, man, serial killer. Everybody's doing serial killer now. You know, but when I went and read it, it's fabulous, people. It's fabulous.
I'm glad that you liked it, because lots of other people have really enjoyed it. I mean, on this page a bit further down, people have left reviews, and we got a couple of YouTube videos where people have reviewed it, and some tweets that people have put up as reviews and stuff.
Spoiler-rich review, right?
Yeah, a whole 45-minute video. That, God bless that man.
But like there's a ton reviewing this, and they're spot on. So I highly encourage people. This is Lucifer's website, everybody. I put it in the chat at the top, but I'm going to put it again here so you guys can find it. Real easy. There you go. Your pictures are fabulous.
Why, thank you very much.
I was looking at these and I was like, man, I need new headshots. But there's your greetings and salutations. How the devil art thou? You got to have it. So, but it's just amazing. Like, people, I encourage you to go to this website and just click around. You can not only see all of Ed Gein, Demon Hunter, you can see all the different like blogs and podcasts and videos and other things that Lucifer is involved in. Really cool. There's a store. Please pick up a copy of Ed Gein, physical copy, because I like reading PDFs, but it's the feeling of turning the pages and getting the experience as it was intended. you know what I mean, is really where I live. I really encourage people to do that. So all of his stuff is here, plus some additionals, so you can shop around. I would like to also talk about this other book. And now you said that this was actually in, that you were scripting this before Ed Gein, yes?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I was scripting it before Ed Gein, and it was intended to come out before Ed Gein. Things did not work out that way, unfortunately.
They never do.
It was one of those productions that just didn't go the way that it should have gone. And originally, I was the one who was illustrating it as well.
Yeah.
And there were lots of hiccups along the way. And I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I'm not the right person to be drawing this. You know, because originally it was going to be the last time I ever drew a comic book kind of thing. I'm sure I will draw another one in the future. But I got to the point where I was like, I need someone else to do this, because at the moment we got a lot of shit coming our way, and I just need to get someone else to do this.
That's the thing is, as a writer, the more you take on in other aspects, then the less time you have to write.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's the hardest part. And when you can find someone as talented as Christian to really breathe life into the story, it just makes sense. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I approached Christian whilst he was drawing Ed Gein Demon Hunter and said, like, what are you doing after Ed Gein Demon Hunter? Because I don't say this to many people, but I like giving you money. And you know, I gave him a very brief synopsis of it and explained the situation that I was in and stuff, because there was a lot of stuff that was affecting the production that was taking place in my personal life. Like I had to see a solicitor because I had this mad person who was harassing me and stalking me and stuff like that. So that got in the way of things.
Oh, for Pete's sakes!
I know, right? I know how to pick them, don't I?
Oh, man.
Something tells me I should change my name so it's still a biblical one, but just a nicer one. Maybe I should go back to doing kids books.
I just don't get people. I really don't. But again, that's the whole reason why we're here, right? It's because Ed Gein, we don't understand like why people can be so unhinged at times, but they do it for many different reasons.
Oh, absolutely. And luckily, Christian was I know he was in a sane frame of mind when he said yes, but I like to think that he was in a delightfully twisted frame of mind. And I just caught him at the right moment. He went, yeah, go on then. And I sent him the scripts over and he finished up Ed Gein and said, yeah, look, you know, I am doing another book, but I can do 2 books at the same time. That's not a problem and stuff. And I sent him the script. Now, when I sent him Ed Gein Demon Hunter scripts, it had been a long time since I had sent anyone a script who was in the industry, who's a professional, and got their critique back and stuff. So once I sent him the script, I didn't have nights of solid sleep. I had nights of solid anxiety.
Yes.
Because I was like, oh God, like Christian is so much more in this industry than I am. Like, what if he hates it?
Right.
What if he hates it but still draws
it? That's that imposter syndrome that creeps up on us.
Yes.
Even though when we know we have something, like I'll send a script and same thing, people, I just wait, and it's like I'm waiting and I'm waiting and I'm like, they just didn't read it. I'm like, they're too busy. Or if they did read, what if they hated it? Oh my God. What if it's terrible? Like, I'm not going to send this script to anybody else.
Yeah. So I sent those scripts and like was biting my nails and everything. And then he came back and I will never forget it. His email said, okay, so first of all, you're a really talented writer. This story's great. I thought, I'm never going to get better than that. And then I sent him the Lady Satan scripts and he came back and he said, look, I've worked on a lot of different books. And he's worked with publishers like Alterna Comics. He's worked for DC Comics as well. So he's seen a lot of great scripts. And he came back and he said, this is the most original and fascinating script I have ever read. And I cannot wait to get started on it. And I was like, yes, come on.
You've done it. Success.
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. And then he told me about how much more I needed to pay him in comparison. I was like, oh, okay. Worth it. You buttered me up just right.
I'm like, I have to whoop After what? I'm like,
to be fair,
okay.
Christian is such a good artist that he could turn around and say, right, per page, I want you to go out there dressed as Spider-Man and hug a nun, and I'll take that as payment. And you won't think twice.
I would do that in a heartbeat.
Exactly.
Right?
You'd be like, okay, done deal. Do you want money as well?
Is that all?
What else do you want me to do? Like,
done. Say less.
Whatever price he says, I'm like, no worries. Like, I'll sell a kidney. It doesn't even need to be my kidney.
I only have 2.
That's why I use other people's.
Right. I'll be like, I have to go. Be right back. I'm gonna get a shovel.
And the work he's been doing on Lady Satan is absolutely fantastic. I mean, when he was sending pages through for Ed Gein Demon Hunter, every time I got a batch of pages, I was just like, wow, it just gets better and better and better. And then I'm seeing the Lady Satan stuff come through, and Ed Gein's over, and we've wrapped up campaigns and stuff, and I'm doing conventions, and I'll be out there speaking to people and signing books. And then I would get an email and be like, oh, it's a Christian email. This is exciting. And then you would open up those pages and be like, fuck, this is incredible. And like, I mean, I asked him to draw some pretty horrible stuff in Ed Gein Demon Hunter. It gets darker and worse in Lady Satan.
Yeah.
Never complains. He never questions it, never complains. He just reads the script and he's like, on it.
I love artists that are like that. Like my story, same thing, where it's like, okay, we're gonna get pretty dark in this one, and they're just like, all right, what color do you want the hair to be? And I'm like, that's all you. All right.
It's great because in a way it means that every time I do a book, not only am I challenging myself as a writer, I'm challenging myself to find that thing that I can put in the book that will make the artist turn around and go, I love you, but no.
Gonna get it. I think the artists like to be challenged themselves too. And it's
absolutely.
like, and of course with horror, it's like in the beginning, you usually, like for me, my issue 1 is a pretty gory moment. But the further we get into the story, the crazier it gets, the more gory it gets, and more, outlandish, right? So it's like in the beginning, it's like there's a challenge, we're gonna continue to challenge, but wait until we get to like issue 7, issue 8. And then I'll be like, good luck, artist.
Yep.
We're gonna have some fun, right? But it's like leading up to that, they're constantly growing and pushing themselves anyway. So I love the fact that artists are like that, where it's like the longer you work with them, they continually amaze you. They're always upping their game and they're turning in art. And I love getting new pages from Marco, the same thing, where it's like, oh, look at that, that, And I'm like, I want to share it, but also don't want to spoil the story. So I have to restrain myself from being like, look at all this stuff.
Well, the thing is like with Ed Gein, I sent him all 4 scripts straight away.
Yes.
So that he could read the hot story as a whole. With Lady Satan, I knew it was going to be like a few story arcs, and each story arc would be its own self-contained story, but together they would tell this much larger story.
Yeah.
So I actually send him the scripts. Like when he finishes one issue, he gets the script for the next issue, because I want to keep him in that suspense. I want to see how long I can keep him on board for. I know, right? I know. And like each time he's just like, oh, this is great. And I'm like, yeah, and it's going to get darker.
Right,
it's going to get rougher. He's like, I'm putting my punches on this one, but not in the next one. I won't be.
Yeah, I feel you. And it's like, I always warn my readers too. I'm like, don't get attached.
Yes, absolutely. See, you warn your readers. The most warning I do is, I am a bit weird. This is a bit messed up. And that's it. I don't give them any more than that.
Well, that's like the blanket thing I said from the beginning. I'm like, don't get attached. And I just say the same thing every issue. I'm like, don't get attached. But I've heard lots of people just read my comic and then throw it when they're done. They're just like, that's stupid. What's next? But that's what we want, people. That's what we want. So can you give us an overview of what Lady Satan is about? Yes,
I can. And I shall.
Please.
Lady Satan is the story of Lucille. Lucille is a stripper from Paris, France. And she's had a bit of a rough upbringing. And she finds herself in a position where she's been abducted to be the star of a snuff film. But she manages to do something that no one's ever done before, and she survives the experience. And that's part of the mystery behind the story. I mean, I've had quite a lot of people that hear that and go, it's not really a snuff film then, is it? And I'm like, read the book.
Out of it.
Yeah, it's like read the book, you'll understand.
Right.
You know, but it is part of the mystery. How did she get out of it?
Right.
And because of that experience, she is completely broken as a human being. And she wants to return to a place where she can at least be mildly happy, but she can't do that because she's got all this trauma stored up in her head.
Yes.
So she's on this mission to find the only copy of the snuff film that she starred in so that she can destroy it. And that way exorcise her demons, for want of a better phrasing. But because of this, she becomes a very violent vigilante called Lady Satan. And like I said, the experience broke her. It was a very brutal and traumatic experience. She has PTSD. She has a lot of anxiety and depression. She also has, because of the experience, an illness called persistent genital arousal disorder, which means when she's involved in very violent, bloody conflict, she will end up having an uncontrollable orgasm that's extremely painful and debilitating.
How traumatic. It's like,
yeah.
When I was reading that part, I was like, ooh, that is just so dark, because I mean, the fact that she has this trauma from being in a snuff film, right? So there's already sexual nature there, and then it ruins the experience for her going forward. So she's getting these uncontrollable orgasms, and it's not pleasure, it's pain, and it's a constant reminder of what she went through. So there is no escape. So even as she continues to exercise her demons, it traumatizes her further and further. And I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, I'm not kind to my characters.
No,
Don't know if you can tell.
Never are, but that's where she starts.
Yes, that's where she starts, because
like,
when the book starts, Lucille has found her way onto British soil, where she's following leads, trying to track down where this copy of this snuff film is, and she's come across a corrupt MI5 agent who's been dealing in like child pornography and stuff like that, thinking if anyone's going to know, it's him. And she discovers that he has a bunch of files on a lot of very horrible criminals. And one of them happens to be a high-ranking British police officer named Chief Inspector Bennett, who Lucille recognizes as being the man who tortured her in front of the camera for the snuff film. And he's under investigation from the MI5. He's about to be arrested. So she sees that there's this small window of opportunity. It's not the snuff film, but it's a part of the snuff film.
Right.
So she now goes out to exact her revenge upon Chief Inspector Bennett without getting arrested and before he gets arrested, which is one hell of a challenge. And that's just the first story arc of Lady Satan, because she will learn that there's a lot more to her snuff film than she realizes. Something a lot more sinister and a lot darker that she has to battle as the story progresses.
Yeah, I figured you weren't going to stop there.
No. Why would I? Why would I?
Issue 1, people. So this story, how many issues are planned?
Well, that depends on how many story arcs I can keep this going for.
So you are currently writing it?
Well, no, I've got the first story arc written.
Okay.
All the other story arcs are planned out. Okay, so I'm treating it a bit more like a TV show. I have a map, a roadmap of where it's going, and I reckon it will be about somewhere between 3 and 5 story arcs. And I'm intending each story arc to be roughly 3 issues each.
Gotcha.
So Christian is signed up to do the first story arc, the first 3 issues. And I haven't told him this yet, but I am going to beg, plead, possibly cry, and say anything that will keep him on for the rest of the story arcs, because he is such a magnificent artist and he's done such wonders to this character and this story. I can't imagine anyone else doing it. And I don't think I want to see anyone else doing it.
Right. I know that feeling. Absolutely. It's like you get used to seeing your characters a certain way through a certain interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, I've got no problem with working with other artists. I mean, one thing I will say is the book that comes out after Lady Satan. I'm not going to say what that is. You'll have to wait till towards the end of the year to find out. But I do have an artist booked for that book that isn't Christian.
Gotcha.
Because Christian will still be working on Lady Satan at the time. So I'm going to have 2 artists working, which means I am going to be broke for a very long time. No social life, but I never had one in the first place. It's all
if this is if you want to come on my show, we can call this your social life. You can come
Excellent.
on the show and hang out and chat, and we'll call this social life because it's kind of what I do.
I'd rather this. I mean, like, have you been outside lately? Right, it's full of people, bunch of bastards.
Today I actually have interesting situation. My husband is at work and my kids are at grandma. So I have the whole house to myself in the summertime, and that never happens. So I feel like it's quiet here and I kind of like it. But usually it's the opposite for me. There's so much going on where it's like I don't get that quiet time to just be by myself. And of course, that's all going to change soon anyway because we're getting a puppy on Saturday. Yay, the puppy, but it's a puppy. Like the first 3 months is the hard part. But I'll bring him on the show and I'll show people the new puppy too.
Here I am, Prince of Darkness, going, yes, snuff films, serial killers. And then you mentioned puppy, and I'm like, woo!
I know. Aren't we a funny breed? The horror people were like,
we are.
You know, death, dying, decapitation, some disembowelment. It's good. It's good. Ooh, shiny things and puppies. We like that.
Oh, we like those. It's because they're complex creatures.
I can't explain it, people. That's just how we roll.
It is. We have. I think we have a very healthy relationship with the dark side of life. Basically,
you just have to walk. In my opinion, I have to walk the line where it's like I write things that are so dark. I need to spend some time in the light, or you know what I mean. I'm very creative, but I can be very destructive because I do martial arts. You know what I mean? So I can
wonderful.
So I think my whole life is about finding that balance between the darkness and the light and where to walk.
Yeah, I think for me it's more the case of knowing that there's darkness in the light, but there's also light in the dark.
Yes.
I know that sounds very contradictory, but there's a lot of truth to it.
100%. Like even your best, your hero characters, your characters with good intentions will still have flaws and can still make mistakes, and vice versa. Like your like Satan and your Ed Gein. It's like he's freaking Satan, but still what he's doing is trying to stop the destruction of everything. So he still has some redeeming character. So it's interesting. You know what I mean? Can I also mention that having the name Lucifer Storm and your artist Christian Rossi, having the two names on a cover is also kind of contradictory. It's kind of interesting.
It's brilliant, isn't it? It's amazing watching people read those names and looking so confused.
And sometimes it's just how things happen and it was meant to be. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But it's lovely seeing that expression, like they're looking at the book as if it's a winning lottery ticket. But their expression is saying, someone's just told me I've got 5 seconds to live. And they don't know how to process it. And I think that's such a lovely thing to see. Because we, like the universe that we live in, it's full of duality. Everything exists because of duality. And like seeing that happen in front of you, that lovely, ambiguous duality happening. Oh, it's amazing. Absolutely, mate. It's like when people are reading the book and they go, yeah. And they're like, hold on, I just rooted for the serial killer.
Right.
What am I doing with my life?
Or I was laughing about what the demon said. You know what I mean? Because Ezra's really funny.
Yes, I like lots of people like Ezra because he has such a sarcastic, like dry wit to him, and like he's got that lovely like posh tone to his voice. Yeah, and then something will just spill out.
Right. There's no filter. I mean, he's a demon. Why should he have to filter? But it's just he cracks me up. Just the things that he says and the fact that he's a bloodhound.
Yes. I absolutely
dopey looking dog with big old ears.
and he's saying this stuff. Like I think one of my favorite scenes in it is where they're at Warden's Hardware at the beginning of issue 3,
Yeah.
And Ed's asked him to sort of like keep Augusta occupied because he's got a plan and stuff, and he's had this altercation with Augusta, and then like Ed's done something and Augusta's about to teach him a lesson, but she's got Ezra by the scruff of his neck and she just smiles, and then she throws him through the window and he bounces on the sidewalk, and then he just, what was he said? I should know, I fucking wrote it, but he says, I'm not being monetarily compensated enough for receiving this kind of abuse. I think that is my favorite bit of dialogue for Ezra.
He's like, I didn't even want to be here in the first place, and now I gotta do this.
Yeah, and now I'm putting up with this shit. But I also love his relationship with Ed, because Ed is opening up to someone for the first time.
Yes.
And he's starting to listen to what other people are saying for the first time.
Right.
And he's still trying to fight that, no, what you're saying about my mother's wrong. But they're laying down the evidence that he cannot ignore. And for the first time in his life, someone isn't manipulating him. They're not trying to control him. He's a God-fearing man. He's speaking to a demon that's disguised as a bloodhound. And that demon is saying to him, I'm proud to be your friend.
Right.
And there's something really nice and moving and touching about that. Like, their relationship, it's one of those things I walk away from the book and I'm like, if anything, I think that is one of my proudest moments in this story, is being able to craft that kind of relationship. Because I know I'm not alone when I say there were certain times where I'd read back like little bits, little scenes like that, and I go, "Aw."
Yeah.
And there are people who are reading it and they're doing the same thing, and then they're slapping themselves going, it's a serial killer and a demon dog. What the fuck?
Why do I feel this way? I shouldn't feel this way.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a win. I've been ignoring the chat. So first of all, I want to say shout out to Max and Atrocity Press. Here he has all his stuff here. Ninja Bimbos, we're gonna play their commercial later. He did have a question, and we kind of touched on this, and I was researching this as well. Where he's like, he always wondered about Gein. If his mother said all women are promiscuous, does that mean she was promiscuous? Where she saw herself above that. So she had that narcissistic tendency as well, where it was like, the world is all shit. Listen to your mother knows best. Women are crap except for your mother, right?
Yeah. She was a very committed woman. She she stayed with her husband right through to the end. And she had nothing but bad things to say about him. But it's one of those things where you go, was Augusta fucked in the head because of the husband? Or was the husband an alcoholic and abusive?
He had to deal with Augusta.
Yeah, and I think that is more likely the case. The evidence would suggest that it was Augusta that was at the heart of all of it, and that led him to drinking. He was then abusive towards the children, because for a lot of guys, if they end up marrying a woman who has narcissistic personality disorder, they can get out of it until they have kids.
Right.
And that's where they're in a position of, I can either go and deal with some sort of survivor's guilt, or I can stay and be a martyr. Either way, it feels like death to them. So they're like, hey, better the devil you know than the devil you don't.
Right.
And Augusta was someone who did see herself as above everyone else. She was one of those people that would always say, like, I'm a real Christian. They are not a real Christian.
Right.
Okay. And she was always
grow up, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you really look into it, obviously doing a book like this, you're going to get lots of people who are like, how dare you? How could you? Rah, 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 rah. And when you really look into it, it's a very tragic life that Ed Gein had. I always make it clear to people, I don't condone what he did.
Right.
But this isn't about what he did. It's about why he did it. And the reason why he's fascinating and scary at the same time is because that could have been any of us.
Right. Seriously. Again, it's that nature versus nurture. How much of it is him inheriting Augusta's messed up genes?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Versus how she raised him as a person to be able to do those things. And it's like that when he lost his empathy because she taught him that women were, tools of the devil.
Yeah.
There's no empathy there. And then, he has no problem digging up their corpses and turning them into lampshades.
Yeah. And all because he wanted to bring his mother back from the dead.
Right.
Because he stayed with his mother right till the day
Gosh.
she
People, if you want
died.
to read something interesting, go read Ed Gein's Wikipedia page.
Yeah.
Where it talks about, you know, basically when she had died, that's when he started creating the skin suit because he literally wanted to become her and like crawl into her body.
Because another thing that I found out from the research is that at first he wanted to bring his mother back from the dead. He believed that he could using things like voodoo. And then he found that that didn't work. And he realized he had this thing happen in his head. And this is very common with people who are abused as children. Is whether it be psychological, physical, sexual, doesn't matter. This is very common. Is they have a moment, especially in their adult life, where they go, would this have happened to me if I was the other gender?
Right.
And Ed spent a lot of his life feeling that he should have been a girl. And a part of that was because of the abuse he was receiving and his subconscious telling him, if you were a girl, this wouldn't have happened. Especially as when he was born, Augusta had already had one child, a boy, and she hated having that boy. She was very sexist towards men. And when she found out she was pregnant again, she spent night after night crying as she prayed to God, please let this one be a girl.
That's fucked up.
It is. It's really messed up. And when she ended up having Ed, she was like, right, well, that's the first thing you've done wrong. I'm sure there'll be a long list along the line. So a part of the reason why he was killing women and digging up corpses and using their skin to make a female suit was because he wanted to have a sex change. And during that time, the only way you could do it is you had to fly over to the Netherlands. And he couldn't afford to do that. So he did the next best thing. He made his own skin suit that he would wear at night to become a woman.
Right. Yeah, he had faces. And it's interesting to me that his father had worked as a tanner, so he probably picked up some of those skills at some point of how to deal with skin, because skinning something is not not a skill that you innately have, people.
No, absolutely not. And like you speak to taxidermists and they'll tell you how difficult it is and how just on you could get a row of, say, like crows to taxidermy. And each one's skin will just be that tiny bit different. So you got to handle it that tiny bit differently, and all the different chemicals you have to use and stuff. So yeah, he definitely learned a lot from his father, without a doubt. And of course, his father and his brother used to go hunting, and they would take Ed with him. And he was he was a very sensitive child to a lot of this stuff. Another one of his earliest memories was being out in the yard reading a book, and then hearing noises come from the barn and going in there and seeing his father and his mother gutting deer.
Yep.
And that terrified him. And they would see him there and go, what are you doing, boy? You shouldn't be seeing this. And then they would beat him. It's fascinating. Absolutely fascinating for all the wrong reasons.
Right. And it's just interesting to me too is people's fascination with serial killers. One of the things that I was reading about Ed Gein is that people were showing up because he was buried with his family, so between his mother and brother, I believe. But at some point, people were going to his grave and stealing bits and pieces of his gravestone to the point where they finally just took the whole thing.
Yeah.
Why are we so fascinated where we need a piece of that? It's really interesting that people can be that way. And then we're interesting because I don't know if we not idolize. We're fascinated with that.
It's because it's a human being.
Right.
That is the main thing behind it. We live our lives doing our thing. And we hear about someone like Ed Gein or Jeffrey Dahmer or Gary Ridgway, and we think, I can't imagine doing that.
Right.
But yet they're a human being, just like I am. We have this moment where we forget that everyone on this planet, and I know there's going to be lots of people that hear that and go, that ain't me. And it's like, yes, it is. Everyone on this planet, not one person excluded, has done something in their life that they would never tell anyone about, and they will take it to the fucking grave. And they see someone like this and they go, that's the kind of thing where if I did that, I would take it to the grave. I wouldn't tell anyone. But yet these people are being caught. And it's like, okay, the dark secret that I have or you have doesn't even fucking compare to this.
No, right.
You know?
And when it's a compulsion like that, they're not going to stop.
Exactly.
So that's why they get caught. But it's just, such a interesting thing that we study, is what makes them do those things. Like we said, nature versus nurture. So, but I do think that when it comes to nurture and society and how we treat each other, that really any of us have the potential of going down that dark way.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Any one of us could do it. Even if we think we can't, we probably could. And that terrifies us.
That's terrifying.
Because the moment we start thinking that, that's when our ego steps in and goes, no, not me. Because the ego is meant to protect you. Meant to.
Right.
But it doesn't. But that's a different topic of conversation for some other time. But things like that kick in. But it's not just when you start to realize, hold on, there are people that can do that. And you think, shit, could I do that? I don't want to think so.
I think that's why it's fascinating, because it's showing the darkness inside the human. And it's like, am I capable of such things?
Yes. And whether we like it or not, we don't like being lied to, but at the same time, we like being lied to. Right? We like being told, don't worry, you're going to have next weekend off work. We love being told that, but we don't like being told, no, there is no one else, just you. I'm committed to you, kind of thing. So yeah, there's a lot to it, but I think it mainly comes down to people are fascinated with it because they're like, could I be that person? Could I be pushed to a point where I snap and I do something like that? So we start looking at these serial killers going, do they share anything in common with me? Because if so, maybe I could be the next one. So that's one aspect of the survival thing that's in us. Okay. Right. But the other aspect of it is, do I know anyone who acts like
who is doing these things?
Because if so, I don't want to be their next victim.
I think that's why a lot of people listen to true crime podcasts, because it's like, you're looking for a pattern, or like how do people escape? How do people survive? Because
we're obsessed with patterns.
Yeah, for sure. So it's like, are you looking for, the same kind of behavior in your societal circle? Ew, we should stop inviting the Petersons over for lunch.
Yes. Because the scare.
I don't know any Petersons, so
there's also that thing. I think part of the fascination that comes in, and that survival instinct kicks in, because we're not taught things like basic psychology at school.
Right.
Okay. When we're growing up, we're taught like, this is the alphabet. This is how you read a watch. This is how you do algebra, even though you probably won't need it. Some people will, but most people won't. But they don't sit down and go, okay, you're going to hear this term psychopath. But there's a difference between a psychopath and a sociopath. Let's explain what they are. Because those words are used as if they're interchangeable, but they're two different things. They look so similar. People look at Ed Gein and say, that's a psychopath. No, that's a sociopath. It's the same with Ted Bundy, same with John Wayne Gacy. I think you'll find pretty much every serial killer out there falls in the realm of sociopath.
Right.
But if you really want to be scared, right, 1 out of every 10 people you walk past is a psychopath, and you don't know it.
Dun, dun, dun.
Exactly. Exactly.
And it's not me. I swear to God, people, it's not me.
No, see, we're the first two. Pops is the third one. So if we get another 7 people in, whoever the 10th one is, sorry, buddy.
It's usually the panel we get together. And I think the odds are a little bit higher in the panel sometimes. No? Pops left.
See, Pops came in to prove it's not me. I'm the third one here.
Right? We gotta wrap up the show. Dang. It's like sometimes 2 hours just flies by, man.
I know.
Don looks around. It's not me. When can we expect to see Lady Satan published?
The first issue will be coming very soon.
Mm-hmm.
And I do mean very soon. We are releasing the issues as they are completed, but because there are people who backed an Indiegogo campaign from 2020 when we first started promoting it, they obviously get their stuff first.
Right.
And then once that's over, then you can get it from my website and stuff. So we're looking kind of like mid-August, you'll be able to get issue 1, and then it will probably be closer to Christmas for issue 2. Because these are larger page counts. Ed Gein Demon Hunter, it's 28 pages per issue. This is 36 pages per issue. And because Christian's juggling like 2 or 3 books at the same time, it is going to take that a little bit longer.
Right. And people can purchase all the issues of Ed Gein from your website, which is
really
the best place to go, people.
Yep.
So when you head over to luciferstorm.com, right up at the top, it has all the hyperlinks. Just click on books. There you go. Ed Gein is the top one. Click on find out more, and you can purchase all of the books there. There's also a store link, so people can head there and see digital copies, black and white copies, physical copies, whatever you want. It's listed. So please go here, support indie comics, buy this. You will not regret it. It's a great read, story-wise. It'll fill that niche of the horror. There's a lot of horror in here. There's a lot of gore. It's spot on. So when you get historically accurate gore, I think it's like a whole category by itself, and it definitely checks some boxes for me. So
I like that flow of words. Historically accurate gore. I've never heard them put together before, and I like it.
Feel free to use it.
I will happily steal it, and I won't be ashamed whatsoever. And if anyone's kind of like, oh, I don't know, do I really want to put money on this or not? Sign up to my mailing list, and you'll get a PDF of the first issue for absolutely free of charge.
There you go, people. You can read it for free. Get through the first one. Trust me, you'll be hooked. I am. So that's definitely the place where you want to go. So please check.
Just back it already.
I didn't push the button. Pops pushed the button. I wasn't prepared. Seriously, go buy it already. What are you waiting for? So where can people find you, Lucifer, besides your website?
Normally out on the street shouting at parked cars when it's a full moon. That is normally one place that people can find me. But if you want to stay to the digital realm, you can find me on Twitter, you can find me on Facebook, and you can find me on YouTube. Just look for Lucifer Storm or The Lucifer Storm, except no substitutes, people.
There you go. Perfect. Anything else that you would like to add before we say goodbye?
Yes, I would like to clarify that I'm not the second gunman on the grassy knoll. I think that's a very important one. I've had accusations. I wasn't responsible for 9/11, regardless of what my mother says. Okay.
What's wrong with people?
I know. I need to get new friends, don't I? You've heard my stories, and it's
friends
like
friends are the ones accusing you of these things. Yeah.
No, my mother.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me on.
Great conversation. Please come back whenever you have anything on your mind and you want to come on. You are welcome.
I will.
I feel like there is a treasure trove of stories out there that we could talk about and really pick your brain about writing. I think you have some great ideas, and I would love to just talk about like writing mechanics. It's great to watch art being created, but really, let's talk about creating a story sometime. I would love it.
Yes, I would love to do that. That would be amazing.
Thank you so much. All right, everybody, say goodbye to Lucifer, and I will catch you all next week. I should actually have the button prepared before I say that.
No, why do
Okay, bye, everybody. Bye.
Entertainment Group presents the Madness Comic Network, with original programming and additional comic-related content.
The Civil War was America's bloodiest conflict. Over 500,000 died to preserve national unity. When the war ended, Confederates like Harley Brogdon headed west, shooting game for the Army and gambling. When a card game turns deadly, Harley shoots in self-defense, killing the card sharp who threw down first. Wilfred Knorr, the card sharp's wealthy father, will stop at nothing to see Harley hang. Harley flees to Koepp's Gap, an old silver mining town at the foot of the Rockies. A remarkably peaceful town, especially after dark. But the sheriff harbors a dark secret, and no one dares go into the mines anymore. Koepp's Gap is full of secrets. People speak in hushed tones of something in the mines. Something worse than their cursed sheriff. Something even the Indians fear from the deepest pits of hell. Every secret will be exposed. Bronze Star. Order your copy at bronzestarcomic.com.
Comic Books for Kids provides comic books to kids in hospitals and cancer centers across the U.S. It's a place where we can all work together to make sure every child has a comic book. 100% of all proceeds go towards the kids. It's about making a difference, and while they're in the hospital, allowing them to fly like a superhero, battle dragons, or rescue teddy bears. We are in every state in the country and now support over 160 hospitals. Every month, we add more.
Visit